Committee will be in order, and thank you very much, and good afternoon. I welcome each of our members back after what I hope was a productive work session. Today we are going to consider a rule to allow for debate on the floor of two appropriations bills, H.R. 2216, the Military Construction and Veterans Affairs Appropriations Act for fiscal year 2014, and H.R. 2217, the Homeland Security Appropriations Act for fiscal year 2014. Each of these appropriations measures is vitally important, not only for Congress to get their work done, but also to meet the necessary needs of our country, including providing military and first responders with the appropriations that they need to do their work. Additionally, H.R. 2216 ensures that our military veterans are treated with respect, which they so richly deserve. Each, I'm sure, member of Congress had an opportunity over the break to attend the Memorial Day festivities around the country, not only in parades but also at solemn events where we, around cemeteries and places where veterans are honored for their services and their lives are appropriately given across this country, including watching the President of the United States as he respectfully attended to his duties to honor veterans at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldiers. Last Friday, the Budget Committee, through its chairman, Paul Ryan, sent me a letter requesting that we include budget enforcement mechanisms in this rule today, which will help us create a framework necessary to effectively and efficiently appropriate money for fiscal year 2014. The House-passed budget resolution provides the chairman of the Committee on the Budget authority to adjust certain budgetary allocations. Several allocations need to be changed because the President, as we all know, was delayed in his submission of his budget proposals by more than 2 months, and so it meant that we had to adjust some of those levels, which the President naturally does confer and give to the House and the Congress as we move forward. We will be allowing this. I concurred with the chairman, both his letter to me and what will soon to be my letter back to him, which I have approved this afternoon, will be signing, will be available for members of the Rules Committee. The rule today will ensure that this authority is available to Chairman Ryan so that we have appropriate budget enforcement mechanisms in place as we begin the annual appropriations process. However, it's important to note that Chairman Ryan has stated that he continues to work with the Senate also as we move forward to what could be an eventual conference. So before we get to that point, we're going to give the chairman the appropriate mechanisms that he needs to ensure that this body can appropriately move forward, including today, on appropriations measures. And then as he is successful with his counterparts in the United States Senate, then we will see budget resolutions. So what we're doing today is providing the tools necessary for us to do our work. The conversations with Chairman Ryan have been appropriate and I believe timely to ensure that this body can do its work and move forward pending his work with the Senate on the budget plan as it might be in a conference with the United States Senate. I want to welcome everybody back. Delighted that you're here, and don't know if the gentleman from Florida would like to make an opening statement today. The gentleman is recognized.
No, Mr. Chairman, an observation that is not particularly pertinent to today's events, but I agonized with my colleague from Oklahoma, Congressman Cole, and the enormous impact that has taken place not only in Oklahoma but in Missouri, Illinois, other areas of the country that have the tornadic issues. But I think Tom, in representing his people, did just an outstanding job and moving job, and I just wanted to compliment him in that regard, and also to make the pitch for now that we've moved to hurricane season, to have everybody mindful of a need that we have here in this Congress to establish some kind of catastrophic way of going about dealing with these issues rather than doing it the way that we have been in the past. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I appreciate the gentleman's comments, and of course, we all recognize in some sense or another, as it relates to natural disasters, I think we all live in glass houses. I think we, whether we're in Florida or Texas or whether we're in Oklahoma, it is something that we all deal with, the pain, the agony of seeing, no matter where they are, Americans that are in need. And with that thought at the top of our mind, I did want to also yield, if I could, ask unanimous consent to yield to the gentleman from Oklahoma and welcome him back. Gentleman, Chairman Cole's recognized.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, and thank my good friend from Florida for your kind and gracious remarks, and they were certainly reported back to me, quite frankly, when I did not have the opportunity to be here. I'm going to probably take the opportunity on the floor sometime this week, but let me just say for the record, gosh, I heard from so many people on both sides of the aisle that just was overwhelming. I was so appreciative of all the help and the support. I can assure you that every one of you represent people that have been generous enough to respond personally to every kind of disaster fund that you can imagine. I was just telling my good friend, Mr. Bishop from Utah, about a wonderful group of young Mormon missionary children that were in there helping people clear debris and do things. And it was just, it just warmed your heart. Everything from New York City disaster relief personnel. We had folks from all over the country that were helpful and continue to be helpful here. Like our friends from Texas, in our first tornado, we know something about them. And as I was telling Rob and my good friend Judge Carter, some reporter asked me, was there any silver lining in all this? And I said, well, if they ever make a remake of The Wizard of Oz, I'm sure Dorothy's going to be for more, because this has been 6 of these things in about 15 years for us, and this one particularly difficult because of the loss of life associated, which is the greatest single one we've had. But we also had wonderful visit from the President of the United States, and that matters, and we appreciate that. And I can just assure you, my colleagues, the federal response has been robust and has been compassionate and has been everything that you would hope a federal response in a situation like this could be. So we're very grateful for that. And we've been very fortunate in that we've had great first responders. We got a great governor and our former colleague, Mary Fallon, who, again, knows quite a bit about this and has led our state very effectively with a great deal of compassion through this. So, again, I just want to thank you for your thoughts and your prayers, and your kind words, your generosity. And I always tell people that even on your very worst day, and I know some of you have represented constituencies in these kind of circumstances before, on your very worst day, you realize how lucky you are to be an American when all the extraordinary resources and compassion and decency and skill of the American people are immediately available to help you, regardless of region, regardless of political point of view, regardless of anything. That's just the way Americans come together in time of crisis. They certainly have come together that way for us. And so, again, I want to thank each and every one of you and look forward to working with you as we go through this and work through it. And certainly, as my good friend from Florida mentioned, the country's been there for us. We'll certainly try and be there for other parts of the country when these sorts of situations arise. So thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Yield back.
Thank you very much. And I do appreciate the gentleman from Florida's comments in joining in not only from what might be a bipartisan message, but also a regional message that we do care about each other in this country. I did have an opportunity during the week to call the governor of Oklahoma, former colleague of ours, and to express not only our desire that she know that we were watching and waiting, and then she reminded me, and probably a new round of storms is headed to us this afternoon. And this was last week, and of course it was not a one-time occurrence. It's been a regular thing. And I wanted to stand proud as I was at a restaurant watching what was a Oklahoma Thunder, I believe they're Thunder, a basketball player as he went through Moore, Oklahoma, then followed by other people who I did know a little bit better personally, and to see them do well for the people of Oklahoma and our country. And so it's a tough thing. We're glad you're back, Chairman Cole, and welcome back, and we'll wait to hear more about the story and about not just the federal response, but how we can work together. Today we have an opportunity to have here at the Rules Committee the gentleman from Texas, Mr. John Abney Culberson. He is the subcommittee chairman, and also we have the ranking member, one of my fellow Eagle Scouts, Sanford Bishop, who is from the Appropriations Committee, the subcommittee on MilCon and Veterans Affairs, and I would have asked both those gentlemen if they would please come before the committee as is custom. We welcome both of you, but without objection, anything that you have in writing will be submitted into the report, and we would ask for you at this time to please go ahead and advise this committee on your ideas of what you've been doing. I would first recognize, gentlemen, the subcommittee chairman, gentleman from Texas, Mr. Culberson. Gentlemen, is recognized. If you could push that button to make sure that that light appears.
Yes, sir.
It should be a green light. Is it on already? Good. Gentlemen, is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. Ms. Slaughter, committee members, thank you very much for having us here today. I too am delighted to see you back, Mr. Cole, and I know our prayers and thoughts have been with you. And I couldn't agree with you more that events like this, I think, illustrate the resiliency and strength of the American character, and how quickly the whole nation's responded to you, but even more impressively how the people that you represent just picked themselves up and begun to rebuild immediately. There was even a news story I saw of one lady who has had her home destroyed twice. She had her home wiped out in that first big hurricane. She's in her 90s, and she's just as cheerful, and as she's got that little mustard seed of faith, and she knows the good Lord's looking after her, and she's just picking herself right back up and rebuilding her house again. It's a great, I think, statement of the character of the people you represent and the whole nation. And I thank you for having us here today, and we could not, Mr. Bishop and I, this subcommittee couldn't be prouder to have a chance to help the good men and women in uniform, some we're immensely proud of, our men and women in uniform as they serve the country and stand on the walls of Rome defending our freedom, and when they retire and go into the veteran system where they will spend most of their time. The briefest, of course, period of time is when they're in uniform, but they will spend most of their time in the Veterans Affairs, in the VA system. And our bill that Mr. Bishop and I presented to you here today is one that we worked on together, arm in arm. It's a bipartisan bill. The importance of the work that we do in support of our veterans cannot be overstated, and Memorial Day, as you said, Mr. Chairman, is a somber reminder of the sacrifice that our men and women in uniform have made for our country, and we're honored to be here today with you presenting the 2014 appropriations bill for military construction and VA. Mr. Bishop and I did our very best to make sure that this bill is non-controversial, straightforward, bipartisan, fully supports and funds the requests that we received from each branch of the military, the active, armed duty, military services, as well as our VA, and making sure that the needs of our veterans are taken care of. The total amount of the bill is $73.3 billion, which is $1.4 billion more than last year and $1.4 billion less than the budget request. Now, we've provided $2.1 billion more than fiscal year 13 for the VA, Department of Veterans Affairs, but of that increase, $1.9 billion was an advance appropriation for medical care in the fiscal year 2013 appropriations bill. They asked for considerably more. We've got language that Mr. Bishop and I have worked on together to be sure that the VA can document for us the need before they can receive that money. But we are making sure that our veterans are taken care of, and any reductions in this bill reflect Mr. Bishop and mine's effort to control spending and to do our part to reduce the deficit. For example, the bill does not provide funding for 10 military construction projects that we believe lack sufficient justification. Mr. Bishop and I also recommend to you that the bill fund only what the Department of Defense expects to spend in fiscal year 14 for 6 military construction projects, and the bill reduced funding available for the contingency construction account, which has not even been used since fiscal year 2008. Mr. Bishop and I also found $659 million in unobligated balances for construction projects that had been funded in previous years, but unobligated and unspent, so we have rescinded that money back to the taxpayers. And the bill reduces the VA request in a program where they have substantially overestimated their projections. The bill does provide funding required to ensure that military memorials and cemeteries are well tended, that veterans are able to get the health care and benefits that they need and have earned, that the military will have facilities and infrastructure needed to house, train, and equip their personnel, and the military families will have quality schools, housing, and medical facilities. Above all, we feel our subcommittee's responsibility is we think of ourselves as the Peace of Mind Committee, that our job is to ensure that our men and women in uniform and our veterans have absolute peace of mind and don't have to worry for a moment about the safety and security, the quality of the housing for themselves, for their family, for their schools, for their kids, or for their health care when they retire. And it's a bipartisan bill that we are all very proud of, and we hope will earn your support and the support of the members on the floor. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Chairman, thank you for your feedback today. Gentleman George, you're recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and Madam Ranking Member. I am also glad to be here today, going through the regular process, which you can do when both sides do cooperate. Let me just, before I get started, also extend my support to Mr. Cole. We understand what you're going through in our congressional district. We've had 4 disasters over the last 2 decades, 2 500-year floods, and 2 tornadoes, which have been pretty severe. So your folks were very, very helpful in helping us when we were going through our difficulties, and you can rest assured that the people of Georgia are in the process and are sending aid and volunteers to your area. Now, as you know, this bill has strong reputation for common ground and bipartisanship, as members traditionally work together to fund construction of military facilities and to strive to improve the quality of life and the care that's afforded to our veterans and their military families. Chairman Culberson continues this tradition as the bill provides funding levels that members on both sides of the aisle agree are appropriate, while avoiding contentious legislative riders that will complicate passage. On the Milcon side, it will provide funding to refurbish 17 Department of Defense schools and continuous construction on the Medical Replacement Center in Landstuhl, Germany. On the VA side, the bill meets the discretionary budget request in all of the areas of administrative expenses, research, medical care, information technology, and facilities. Now, I know a lot of the members of this committee and across the Congress are concerned about the claims backlog and the electronic health records problem at the VA. Trust me, the members of our committee, especially Chairman Culberson and I, along with Chairman Rogers and Ranking Member Lowy, have spoken with Secretary Shinseki numerous times about these issues, along with Secretary Hagel, and I believe that our bill provides the resources and accountability that are needed to address those 2 problems. With that being said, Mr. Chairman, I request that when the bill comes to the floor, that it come with an open rule so that the full House can have its say and work its will with thorough debate on the FY14 Milcon VA bill. Thank you very much for your consideration.
Thank you very much. Mr. Bishop, I have one question, and it really relates to the positive not only tone that you have provided this committee today, but also the expectation of performance. And I'd like to really talk about that expectation of performance if I can. I would like to join probably every other member of not just this committee, but really probably any member of Congress to say, I am concerned and have spoken numerous times to a number of people about the backlog that you are in reference to. And I don't need to characterize it except to say it's a problem. I'm pleased to hear that you and Chairman Culberson have moved forward, not just with both the Secretary of Defense, Secretary of Veterans Administration, of which I know General Shinseki pretty well from his prior service. What is the level of expectation a member of at least this Rules Committee should have about this backlog? You mentioned we're providing the resources necessary. what should we think and how should we respond back to people about this resolution?
Well, first off, the Secretary provided in January a blueprint after much cajoling on our part to eliminate the backlog entirely by 2015. In order to do that, of course, we've got to resolve the electronic medical records problem. It appears that we thought that it was coming to a head, it was going to be resolved, but just before Secretary Panetta left, it seemed to have gone by the wayside. So as a result of that, Ranking Member Lowy and Chairman Rogers both figuratively collared Secretary Hagel as well as Secretary Shinseki. And out of that, we have a commitment, and our bill will require that they will have a single joint medical records system, not one that's just interoperable, but it's single and it's joint, so that veterans, so that military people and veterans, from the time they enter the service until the time they enter, will have one seamless electronic set of records. We can do that with credit cards instantly. There's no reason why we should not be able to do that with the technology that we have well funded. Unfortunately, they haven't been able to agree on how to get it done, and we are requiring that, and we have some accountability measures in the bill. Not only that, the Secretary has accelerated, has a plan for expedition of the backlog. All of the cases that are over a year old will be dealt with first. The traditional hardship cases, wounded warriors, will be given priority treatment. And in the case of Atlanta, which has some 38,000 backlog cases of the 850,000 altogether, he has moved 100 claims examiners from handling the education and the other benefits to disability claims. And of course, that will, plus the 94 additional disability claims that we're funding in this bill, should help them to do that. So we're expecting some metrics. We're expecting them to respond with monthly reports, which the report language in the bill will require. I think that everyone is in agreement, even the Secretary, that this backlog is unacceptable and that we will require that it be eliminated. Now, let me just say that there is a reason, not a justification. There is some reason for the developing backlog. First off, when this Congress, in its good wisdom, decided to expedite the handling of the Agent Orange claims for Vietnam veterans, that created a surge of claims. Secondly, with the return of the Iraq and Afghanistan veterans, that also is creating a surge. And because of the exceptional medical treatment that we've been able to provide our military, which allows for so many more to survive the wounds that they receive on the battlefield, they have multiple claims. In the past, where they have had a VA claim that may have consisted of 4 or 5 issues, now they may have anywhere from 12 to 20 issues. And in the past, what they've been doing is they've been trying to resolve them all before they move they make a decision. But because of this backlog, the Secretary has now is now requiring that they do provisional decisions, and of course that's to give the veteran the benefit of the doubt. So I think that everybody's serious about it, and this is a no-nonsense response, and we think we have metrics and language in the bill that will require accountability on a 30-day, each month. They have to give an account of where they are.
I appreciate that. The gentleman from Texas, the chairman of the subcommittee, has for quite some time believed that a unified or single, as you may call it, unified medical record was necessary. Could you provide a little bit more substance related to that? I heard you say they've got an agreement on it. Is there anything further that we need to do or consider in this committee or to help you that may be necessary to ensure that that happens, or do you believe that, based upon your talks with both secretaries at the highest levels of this body, that that's being achieved?
It's not a question of funding. It's a question of accountability, and it's a question of the Department of Defense and the Department of Veterans Affairs working together to have a seamless system. The problem is that the Department of Defense medical record system is a proprietary system. The one with the VA is owned by our government. And, of course, there are forces within the Department of Defense that want to keep that stovepipe method of dealing with it, and, of course, that's unacceptable, and it's causing and contributing severely to the backlog. And so we want to end it. We want to have one seamless record. It makes sense, and we're going to hold them accountable, and they've agreed to do it.
Mr. Chairman and members, if I could also add, Mr. Bishop is exactly right. The chairman of the Secretary of the VA has promised us in about 24 months that they have the backlog eliminated. We want to see them held to that standard, so there's very strong accountability language in the bill. I believe Mr. Kingston of Georgia has actually drafted language that's going to hold the VA to that standard that they have themselves set, that if they don't hit their targets, the way Mr. Kingston's amendment's drafted, and it's one we're working with him on, and I support it, the concept is just as in the private sector, we expect the senior leadership of the VA to meet the standards that they themselves have set, or their salary is going to be cut. But we should expect the VA backlog to, in their own words, to be eliminated in about 24 months. And then secondly, on the unified medical record, the example I cannot get out of my mind that I want to share with you is one that Chairman Rogers shared with us, and that is of a young man who lost one of his eyes in Afghanistan and partial damage to his other eye. And when he, of course, went into the veterans system, the VA could not read the DOD medical records, and the young man required immediate surgery. That one eye that he was losing his vision in required immediate attention. But because of the stovepipe problem that Mr. Bishop refers to, the DOD records were illegible, unintelligible to the VA system, and the young man is now blind permanently. Lost his eyesight because of bureaucratic stovepipe. It's frankly inexcusable that this has been going on for over a decade. How many billions of dollars of hard-earned taxpayers' money has been spent for the DOD and the VA to develop a single unified medical record? So for the first time, you see language in both our bill, in Chairman Young's bill, and I know that our staffs are working aggressively behind the scenes with the authorizing committee to come up with language that is uniform and consistent. We're done. This is just absolutely going to require a full court press from all of us in the Congress to the DOD and the VA to transmit the message to them, we're done. This is unacceptable. You're going to have a unified single medical record, so these young men and women, when they go from when they're going from the uniform to the civilian world, that their records can be read and interpreted by the VA quickly and easily. There's just no excuse for it. Then finally, let me point out to you, another reason it's going to require a full court press is the week that we did Chairman Carter's bill in appropriations last week, Secretary Hagel just announced, just out of the blue, he just said, well, I just decided the DOD is going to have our own medical record whether you like it or not. That's it. It's just not acceptable. This requires all of us, arm in arm, the United States Congress, telling the DOD and the VA, we're done, this is not acceptable, and you will have a unified medical record for our young men and women when they move out of the Department of Defense and into VA, so nobody else goes blind or suffers any more permanent injury as a result of some bureaucratic idiocy.
Mr. Bishop, you've now heard Chairman Culberson describe perhaps what may be new. Is that new information about Secretary Hagel's answer and response? Yeah, or I'm not trying to take advantage of either one of you, and you both come here together today.
I've not heard it, but what I did hear from Ranking Member Lowy and from Mr. Rogers, Chairman Rogers, was that in the defense markup of the Defense Subcommittee of Appropriations hearing, Secretary Hagel said that he was going to give an answer on that in 30 days. And that was about 30 days ago.
Yeah.
And we...
I'm sorry, I didn't tell you, buddy. It was the day he did his bill.
Well, that would certainly necessitate, I believe, Chairman Rogers and Mrs. Lowy making sure that they appropriately advised your colleagues, our colleagues, of what the answer would be, and if necessitates that we would come back at the appropriate time and make sure that that's corrected. I think both of you, I've heard you both agree that it's the right thing to do after much study. And so I'll watch this very carefully. I want to thank both of you for being here today. Gentlewoman, Mrs. Fox, recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'd also like to echo the comments of the chairman of the committee about the positive approach that the two of you are taking to the issues that you're dealing with. We certainly appreciate that. Chairman Culberson, you mentioned that if the Uniform Medical Records is not created, if we don't see movement on the part of Veterans Affairs and DOD, then there will be accountability. Can we enforce accountability in this area? Because I'm big on accountability.
I am too. You're right.
And I want to know, how can Congress do this, and will there be the will? What I fear is that we're dealing with these bureaucrats who call themselves the weebies. You know, we be here when you come, Congresswoman, and we be here when you gone. And I've seen that over the years. And so I want to know, can we really put some teeth into this legislation?
Yes, in fact, Mr. Kingston of Georgia is going to offer an amendment on the floor, which I intend to support, that says that if the VA does not meet their own standard that they've given us to reduce the backlog, that their the salary of the senior leadership is cut in a proportionate amount to the level of the reduction in the backlog they did not meet.
Well,
That works in the private sector.
well, can we make it work here?
We're going to do our best. It's one that I know Mr. Bishop and I feels very strongly about. We've been wrestling with how do you get them to move off the dime and solve this problem. And my good friend is right that they've had a tremendous surge in cases because medical science is so extraordinary today. The survival rate of Sanford is something like 99%. It's incredible. If you survive the initial injury on the battlefield, the odds are 98, 99% that you will survive. And so these young men and women are coming back with terrible injuries. Multiple injuries that are terrible. Many of them soft tissue injuries that you cannot see, that we did not understand in years past, the concussion wave of an explosion. So that's a part of it, the Agent Orange issue. The Secretary signed an order. So I understand their problem, but we're done. We're tired of it.
Mr. Bishop, surely.
Let me just say that we are trying to put some metrics in to hold them accountable. And in addition to the increase that we gave them in disability claims processes, an additional 94, we put a language in the bill requiring a monthly reporting requirement for the VA to provide Congress with several statistics, such as the average wait time for each regional office, the rating inventory that's been pending for more than 125 days, rating claim accuracy, month-to-month updates and changes to the statistics. It also includes a report requirement on the VA's Expedited Claims Initiative, and that report should give the committee insight into whether or not the Secretary's new initiative is having positive results. So we haven't put those kinds of reporting requirements in the bill before, but we're doing it now because it's just gone on too long and it's unacceptable.
Well, I want to say, Mr. Chairman, I'm very frustrated as an individual member of Congress at the inability to often get the bureaucracy to do what it should do. And I think we should put in place whatever we can put in place to force these people to do their jobs. I don't know if they're just become inured to the fact that they are creating problems, that they caused a young man to go blind, that they're causing enormous grief and suffering in lots of families because they pay no attention. It just seems like they have no concept at all of service. And yet the people who are injured by their work are people who so unselfishly gave of themselves to go out and protect us so they can be incompetent. I don't think that's what this country's all about. And I just really think we have to do a lot more to push them to do their work. And, you know, I get letters about this every single day. And I write back and I try to explain to people how difficult it is to get the bureaucrats to do what they're supposed to do. And I'd like to be able to offer some real hope to people that some changes are going to occur here and that we won't continue to be in this bind that we're in.
Thank you.
Madam Vice Chair, let me just say that Secretary Shinseki is very frustrated himself, and we've taken him to the woodshed literally, but he has agreed that he's got to do everything that he can possibly do to make it happen. And one of the things, one of the reactions over the last several weeks is that he's had some heads to roll over there because he found out that some people were not performing the way that they should have been performing, and they don't. And I think he's trying to set a tone of no nonsense, and we want to support him in that. We also want to make sure that there's some accountability, and we're putting that in the bill.
Well, thank you. I hope he will continue that. Mr. Chairman, offer my blessings to Mrs. Slaughter and yield back.
We do need y'all's help. It's a full court press from every member of Congress to ensure. It's just the size of the bureaucracy is so huge and so unmanageable and almost indecipherable, unnavigable to these veterans. And I think that's a lot of what's frustrating the chairman of the secretary of the VA. But it's going to take all of us working together. I think we need, if I could recommend to the committee, the Rules Committee, and to the Congress, we need identical language on this unified medical record. We need identical language in our bill, in Chairman Young's Appropriations Defense Bill, and in the National Defense Authorization Act from Armed Services, the authorization bill that Buck McKeon's put together. So if the Rules Committee and the Congress could help us, let's get parallel language in all three of those bills that says this is going to be done. You're going to have a unified record.
Also,
yes,
the VA authorizing committee. Also.
Yes, absolutely. Let's put the same language in every one of them and just, we're done.
I appreciate the feedback, not only the question that the gentlewoman, the Vice Chairman Committee had with you, but also I'm going to look further at the testimony that you've given today about feedback from Secretary of Defense and find out whether that was preliminary, a decision that he had made. And because I think that I will completely concur with both of you. Secretary Shinseki has done a marvelous job. I've never once had a time when he was not willing to personally become involved. And I believe Secretary Hagel, in his performance of his duties on behalf of the President of the United States, the American people, can hear from us very clearly on this issue, and that we're willing to work with him. I note there's $344 million as a jump start, what's called a jump start, on this project, and so it's not as though we're not involved in trying to do the same. Thank you very much. Gentlewoman, the ranking member is recognized.
I thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I'd like to say to my colleague, Mr. Cole, that I can only imagine how proud he must be to represent such a wonderful group of people. And to say to you that my entire district and all the talk that we have done is our heart really grieves for them. And over and over again, it's really been a terrible blow to Oklahoma. But as I watch the resilience of the people who live there, it's really an astonishing thing to see. I come from a part of the country where when we have bad weather, we can shovel it. And so we have every bit of respect for what you put up with in living in that
If I
prospect
may,
of being blown away.
if I may quickly, we think the people that can deal with Sandy are pretty tough too. So
Yeah, well, thank you for that.
we were
Thanks.
pretty
I was
amazed
glad
what
to have
you've
you
been
back and from my district to yours, we're on your side to do whatever we can. Gentlemen, thank you for this bill, and I'd like to ask unanimous consent to
Without
put the
objection.
statement of administration in the record. And we're all, as long as I've been in Congress, the concern has been with the VA. From the fact that all those records burned in St. Louis all those years ago, so they were trying to prove everything. But I don't know how much sequestration and the furloughs are probably not going to help us here and try to get this backlog done. And we shouldn't forget that 46,000 to 50,000 our young soldiers, men and women, have come back with grievous wounds. As you point out, these were life-altering wounds. These are brain injuries, loss of limb, really serious. And in addition to that, the people who bear the wounds that we can't see, the people who are mentally distressed and troubled. And while I appreciate that, I wish the VA had done this years ago, because we reached a point at one time we would take almost a year to get to see a doctor. I have some sympathy for them, but I have no idea how they ever got in this mess in the first place, except I appreciated what Mr. Bishop said, that so many of them come back with 10 or 12 kinds of wounds that have to be dealt with, which is not what we had in the past. So we certainly support this bill and do what we can to help get that done. Thank you for your work.
Gentlewoman yields back her time. Gentleman, Mr. Bishop's recognized. No questions. Judge Hastings.
Mr. Chairman, I don't have any question. I'd like to thank the chairman and ranking member. I raise a caution flag and commend to everybody in here front page article in yesterday's Washington Post dealing with the subject of sustainability of issues pertaining to veterans. It's eye-opening, and we had better get into business of serious vision. I think you all have done a more than commendable job, but I would recommend that article to you to let you know you have a hell of a lot of work yet to do.
Thank you. If I may very quickly point out that the VA is exempt from sequestration. The military construction accounts are not.
Thank you very much for that update. As the gentleman has noted, as the gentleman has noted, probably every day we could look up and find things that we're dissatisfied with, perhaps in the VA, perhaps other places. I think that both of you have come here today with a message of what can be done working together and with the administration and their secretaries that so faithfully have accepted that duty and obligation. I stand on your side, and I appreciate it, and I think that what the gentleman has just said is exactly that. We need to stand behind making progress and get better every year, knowing that the American people and the resources that we put forth to do that with an expectation of performance. And I appreciate the gentleman very much. Gentleman, Chairman Cole's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I want to thank both of you for the wonderful work you do, and it really is an example of splendid bipartisan cooperation, and it's not new. I don't know how many Americans know this, but President Bush was president. We increased veterans funding by 100% in 8 years, and President Obama's increased it by an additional 40 beyond that. So this has actually been one of those areas of real bipartisan cooperation, and an area where, while you can never do enough, again, I don't think most Americans realize this, we do more for veterans than every other country on the face of the earth combined. And it tells you what a high priority this is for the American people, regardless of their political point of view, regardless even if they disagree over a particular conflict that we're engaged in. They honor the men and women that go do the tough things that we ask them to do, and they want us to make sure that we keep our commitments once they come home that we've made to them. Also worth noting, I grew up in a military family. What the two of you are doing is not just taking care of veterans. I can assure you that in every military family, and they provide disproportionate number of the men and women that later go on in service, these discussions go on at the budget or at the kitchen table. Did the government keep its commitments? And so you don't just look after our veterans, you're probably our chief recruiters as well in terms of the quality of the services you provide. So I don't have a lot of questions. I just want to really commend you. I know we've got a backlog problem. I know this this is not just a money issue because, again, both parties have done a pretty good job of putting in the resources, and it is going to take the kind of sustained attention that you're clearly giving it. So anything that the rest of us can do to be helpful and in a way that again, honors the people who serve and fulfills the wishes of the American people, that service be recognized, supported, and that the commitments we've made be kept. Just let us know. I think you'll find a remarkable amount of bipartisan support for what you're doing. Thank you. Yield back.
Chairman yields back his time. I note that perhaps he may or may not have been here in the very beginning, but I know our next distinguished member of the panel that will be recognized comes from a military family, supports his family in their endeavor, and we spoke about the importance of Memorial Day, Rich, earlier, and how men and women across this country are not only recognized but also thanked, and a grateful nation. And I would like to recognize gentlemen this time from Florida.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I apologize for my lateness, but we were circling over Washington, D.C., because evidently we had some bad weather, or supposedly bad weather. I appreciate what both of you have done in a bipartisan way. In particular, I have 3 kids that all serve in the United States Army. And, what I've seen in housing that was substandard back in 2005, 2006, dramatic changes in housing for our men and women that volunteer to serve us. And they certainly should have at least adequate housing. And I think you've really met that mark. Same with the VA. The facility-wise and medical-wise is above reproach. But the area that we constantly have problems with, and you know this, is as it relates to claims. You've talked about it. I know in St. Petersburg, there are 50,000 plus claims over 125 days. They're spending, $400,000 in overtime a month just to try to keep up. So the process, and when you look at that regional office, I was just reading a newspaper article from the Tampa Times that was talking about the disarray within the St. Pete office, which is more of a management issue, but it relates with service to their customers, which is the veterans that they're supposed to serve. So I worry that while we fund them correctly, I don't know that we're getting our best bang for our buck in regards to the management of it, and not the line worker. They do what they're directed to do. And one of the things in this article was talking about the bureaucracy within the VA that's causing them additional problems at the line level to get the job done. And so when you talk about records, that consolidated records, I wholeheartedly agree with. I'm concerned that Secretary Hagel, whether or not that's the comment that was made that he will not work with the VA, is that what I took away?
Secretary Hagel's comment on the day that Chairman Carter laid his bill out last Wednesday, I believe, was the day you were up in full committee. He just issued a statement and said the DOD will do its own record, period. And I just was dumbfounded that they would say,
well, hopefully,
after all the pressure and all the work and all, from Congress, that they're just going to do their own record. So
well, hopefully we can persuade him not to do it that way and to work together. I mean, this should be seamless for our kids when they come back, if they're wounded in combat or whether they're visual wounds or unseen wounds, that it should be seamless as it moves into the VA system. It shouldn't be a separate, distinct system. And so I support you in any way I can. And we will be there, holding people's feet to the fire. So thank you so very much for what you do. Yes, sir.
Gentlemen will yield. Let
Yes,
me
sir.
just say also that in our many conversations with Secretary Shinseki, we have emphasized to him the complaints that all of us as members of Congress get from our constituents about customer service. And while the will at the top is clearly in favor of the veterans, and we have a great deal of respect for the sacrifice and the service of Secretary Shinseki, There are people in that mid-range who don't necessarily display the kind of care and concern in the customer service that they give to our veterans. And of course, we have brought that to the Secretary's attention, and he has committed to address that.
Well, I don't know how you get a handle on bureaucracy as large as that.
We've discovered that if you have control over your bureaucrat's budget, their heart and mind will follow.
Well, I think that's a good thing. If you know you're just going to get more money, you typically don't think outside the box to fix the problem. And I think anything that would tie productivity with the mid-management, because I think that's where you're talking about, is at that mid-management level that tends to be resistant of the changes that are necessary, like you say, on customer service.
Mandatory training is being implemented for all of the VA employees so that they will be professionally reminded in an official kind of way what their duty is to the people that they serve. And I think that's a reflection of the complaints that the Secretary is getting from us and that we're getting from our constituents. So we're expecting to see that change. And the other thing the Secretary is doing is he is definitely considering and is going to implement as reports of performance. He's going to integrate into those reports of performance the kinds of complaints that are received about that customer service. I think it's serious, and I think that the Secretary wants to take a no-nonsense approach with that. But he's at the top, and it's an agency that has many heads, and we've just got to make sure that we hold them accountable.
And again, if I could just reemphasize this, it just can't be said enough. The solution is that we have identical language in our bill, in Chairman Young's Defense Appropriations Bill, and in Buck McKeon's National Defense Authorization Act. And when you visit with your staff, that language is being worked out right now. We've got languages stronger than horseradish in ours right now. In the VA, we got identical language in the authorizing committee as well. And with your help, with this committee, and talk to our colleagues and make sure we've got parallel language in every single one of those committees' principal pieces of legislation, and it doesn't give the bureaucracy anywhere to run and anywhere to hide, and the money can only be spent on that unified medical record. And if they don't meet the target they set for themselves, their salary can be on the disability backlog, that your salary can be docked by a proportionate percentage. So we recommend to you two very good solutions. We require a little more tweaking. That's going to require our staffs working on that right now. With your help, we hope to achieve that.
Well, I appreciate both of you in the hard work you're doing, and I yield back to Mr.
Thank you very much. Gentleman yields back his time. In particular, I'd like to note that as part of this discussion, I do recognize that there are lots of ideas on the table. I think the most powerful one is regular feedback that you have established with the two secretaries, that they've got to provide interim reports. And I think the most important thing is that we not be surprised a year or two or three from now that they did not meet what we had expected them to do. And I would like to ask both of you if you could please submit, at least to the gentlewoman, Ms. Slaughter, myself, anytime you do hear from the Secretary or whatever reporting process is, I'm interested in knowing personally and staying up with that. And I think would want to notify the committee, because I think this is a finding that you're bringing forth this committee, and you find not only eager people on this committee, but we'd want to back you up and reinforce the job that you're doing. And I thank the gentleman very much. Gentleman, Mr. McGovern is recognized.
No, I want to thank you both for your work, and I know you've been here for a long time, so I have just want to say thank you, and I have no questions.
Gentleman yields back time. Gentleman, Mr. Webster is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would say ditto. Thank you for your work. It's really good. It's refreshing to see you come together and bring something to us that's going to protect and honor those who have served us by taking care of them in a just and a real way. So thank you for doing it. Also for Representative Cole and his district, I'd like to give my condolences and tell you that our hearts and prayers are with you, and whatever we could do, we'll do it.
Gentleman yields back his time. Gentleman from Florida.
Thank you so much, Mr.
Chairwoman's
Chairman.
recognized.
And I thank the gentleman for coming here and working in a strong bipartisan manner. And as the wife of a Vietnam veteran who's a good friend of Congressman Hastings and the stepmom of two Marine aviators, Marines who are, well, all service men and women are very important to me and to my family. And Doc Burgess and I just got back from a trip to Afghanistan where we had the pleasure and the honor to say hello and greet so many of our fine men and women wearing our nation's uniforms. So we need to support our heroes more than just in parades, but in real life issues, the care that we give them when they come back. And although we've been talking about the shameful backlog, I think this bill also correctly called military construction and talks about investing in the facilities and the infrastructure that we need to house and to train and to equip our military personnel. So we thank you for doing that. And the cleanup of our bases is very important. That continues to be a vexing problem. Improving the quality of life for our military personnel and their families, and we've got to keep the promises that we've made to our servicemen and women. That doesn't end right when they've left the battlefield or the home field. So it's critical that we safeguard veterans' benefits, and health care is an important part of that. And this is going to go a long ways to improve the medical care and speed up that claims process that we've all been dealing with. Anyone who's got veterans hospitals in or around their district know that we field so many complaints from our nation's heroes about this. So they deserve this good service, and that they've earned it. So I want to thank you for performing your duty just like the servicemen and women have performed their duty, and they expect us to come through for them. So to keep our country safe, and we thank you for the service you've given to us. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. Privilege.
Gentlewoman yields back time. Welcome back to both you and Dr. Burgess. Gentleman,
I kept them safe every step. Had to protect them. Gets in trouble all the time.
Gentleman's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I want to commend both of you for working on this medical records issue. I mean, this has been an important problem for too long a time. Many of us remember the Washington Post story from January 2007 about Building 18 out at then Walter Reed Hospital. I went out and visited Building 18. The story was that it was a crummy building with peeling paint, and some of our returning soldiers who were on medical hold were housed there. It was an old Howard Johnson's Motor Hotel. It was a crummy building. To give you an idea how crummy it was, it had previously been used to house medical residents. So just to give you some context as to how bad it was. But what bothered our soldiers out there wasn't the peeling paint, wasn't the mice, the cockroaches. What bothered our soldiers out there was, as they were on medical hold trying to figure out, do they go back to their unit or are they discharged on disability, they would compile these large medical records from the Department of Defense, go through it with a yellow highlighter, making their case for whatever disability they might have. And then I was told by one soldier, it'll go, I've done all this, took me weeks to do it, it will go sit on someone's desk for weeks, and then it gets lost, and I've got to start all over again. And that was a frustration. I was promised by Secretary of the Army, Pete Guerin, Secretary of the Navy, Gordon England, in the fall of 2007 that this would be fixed, and here we are talking about it today. I applaud you for tackling this. You are right. It has to be a clear and consistent effort across all pieces of legislation. It's just time we get this done. It's been 6.5 years. That's worse than an embarrassment. That's legislative malpractice. So I thank you for doing this, and I'm with you every step of the way. We just got to get this one done. And I'll yield back.
Gentleman yields back his time. I want to thank both of you, not only for taking your time to be here today. I recognize you got up first. There are others sitting behind you, but your testimony that you give to this committee is very important. Your visit to the Rules Committee, for you to come here together, for you to work together, and for you to see a common set of issues that is in front of us is important, and I want you to know that both of you are honored members of not only our body, senior members of that, but also your feedback and working together is appreciated and respected by this committee, and I want to thank both of you for being here today. You're now excused.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
yes,
you,
sir.
Thank you,
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman and committee members. Our men and women in uniform and our veterans deserve nothing less than our very best. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You're both now excused, and I want to keep the record open on H.R. 2216, but continue as we will under one rule and invite those that are here to testify for H.R. 2217, Department of Homeland Security Appropriations Act 2014, gentleman from Round Rock, Texas, gentleman, chairman of the subcommittee on appropriations, Mr. Carter, and also the ranking member, the Honorable David T. Price, an honored member of this body. Without objection, both of your anything you have in writing will be entered into the record, and I appreciate both of you taking time. I know you've sat here for quite some time, but we're delighted that you're here, and gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, to my colleague, Mr. Cole, Oklahomans and Texans don't get along during football season, but the rest of the time we're first cousins. And we have been praying for you and thinking about you. And one thing I can assure you, Okies are tough, and they're getting it done. And we'll be there to help. Mr. Chairman, thanks for this hearing today. We appreciate it very much. I'm glad to see my friend got off his airplane. My notice was that he was circling again. I think somebody else was circling, trying to get into D.C., and where I'm glad that Mr. Price was able to join me. Mr. Chairman, our FY14 bill provides $38.993 billion in discretionary funding for DHS, more than $600 million, or 1.56 below the FY13 enacted level, and just below the President's request by about $35 million. This bill is within the subcommittee's 302B allocation for budget authority and outlays, and there are no earmarks in this bill or the accompanying report. In the interest of time, I won't outline all the programs and activities funded in this bill, but I'd like to point out some major themes to the committee. One, funding crucial programs related to the Boston Marathon bombings. What we saw, reactions in Boston, this is what we were looking to fund and enhance as we went forward. Restoring the harmful cuts to DHS's operational and enforcement programs proposed by the President, and reducing spending. These were the things we set out. So this bill it's a demonstration of how we can fund vital security programs, enforce the law, while continuing to reduce discretionary spending overall. First, this bill targets the very programs and systems displayed during the Boston Marathon, restoring proposed cuts for FEMA, first responders grants, increasing CBP targeting, ICE visa security, and TSA secure flights programs, doubling DHS's bombing prevention program, providing a nearly 40% increase to the If You See Something awareness program. And secondly, this bill restores virtually all the proposed cuts to DHS operational programs, to include restoring the cuts to ICE's mandated 34,000 detention beds and vital investigative and enforcement programs, restoring the cuts to the Coast Guard operations and CBP Air Marine operations, restoring the cuts to Secret Service staffing and financial crimes investigation, providing these restorations while also strongly supporting the Department's disaster relief, cybersecurity, and research programs, including a full-year construction increment for the National Agro and Bio-Defense Facility in Kansas. But this bill also instills real fiscal discipline and efficiency by reducing the department's overall budget, significantly reducing headquarters and administrative costs, denying the President's request to create 3 new headquarters offices, and inclusion of substantial oversight requirements ranging from withholding funds for statutory mandates to reporting requirements on everything from major acquisitions to ammunition inventories, purchases, and usages. On a final and regrettably sober note, my staff and I have been regularly talking with our dear friend Mr. Cole and his staff, and doing all we can to help the good people of Oklahoma. We're trying, in his district and the rest of the state, trying to get that area back on its feet from this devastating situation, both in Moore and many other locations now with the second round of storms that came through. So in addition to nearly $11 billion that is currently in the FEMA coffers, this bill fully supports known requirements of $6.2 billion for disaster relief fund in FY14. These funds, combined with our continued oversight, will help ensure disaster assistance rapidly gets to those who've lost so much. To Tom and his constituents, we send our condolences and wish them a speedy recovery. Mr. Chairman, I sincerely believe the bill reflects a strong and bipartisan effort to address our nation's most urgent needs, security and fiscal discipline. And I urge my colleagues to support it on the floor this week. I request an open rule, waiving all necessary points of order against the bill. I'm happy to answer any questions. I'm glad to be joined by Mr. Price, who, for a while there, we thought we were going to be missing in action, and looking forward to what he has to say.
Thank you, gentlemen of the committee, very much. Gentlemen, Mr. Price recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am glad to be here and to be out of the skies where we were circling for longer than I was comfortable with. I also want to welcome Tom Cole back, and on behalf of my somewhat disaster-prone district, say how much we've been thinking about him, and to echo also the chairman's determination to do whatever needs to be done to offer relief, to put FEMA at your disposal, and to make certain that the recovery, the rebuilding is just as efficient and rapid as it can possibly be. The allocation that our subcommittee is working with is close to the President's bill, or close to the President's budget request. In my view, neither number is really adequate to our Homeland Security needs. But I have to say that it's still better than other domestic bills. When you look at our allocation, it does let us put a bill together cooperatively, and we've done just that. When you turn to other bills yet to come, critical priorities such as medical and energy research and law enforcement, investments in education, infrastructure, the discretionary spending cap adopted by the majority in the House budget just simply doesn't reflect reality. And it shouldn't be the basis for our appropriations process. Sequestration was intended to be a mechanism to force the parties to come together to address our long-term challenges. It was never meant to be itself a tool for deficit reduction, much less the basis for discretionary spending caps in appropriations bills. So I in no way endorse the overall budget process in the House. I do want to say, though, that I can endorse the integrity of our subcommittee process. Chairman Carter and his staff have been inclusive and collaborative throughout the development of the bill, continuing a long bipartisan tradition of making the security of the country our bottom line. I want to specifically thank Chairman Carter and the staff for addressing a number of Democratic priorities, including first responder and anti-terrorism grants, as well as providing increases above the request for frontline DHS employees so that they can continue to conduct critical operations along our borders, protect our nation's airports, seaports, and land ports of entry, and respond to natural disasters. I do have some concerns with the bill, which I'll just briefly telegraph. At the top of the list is some of the immigration provisions. I've said many times before that setting an arbitrary minimum of 34,000 ICE detention beds, especially in this fiscal climate, denies ICE the flexibility it needs to manage its enforcement and removal resources in response to changing circumstances. It denies ICE the chance to use cheaper alternative forms of supervision when that's appropriate. The issue isn't simply the particular number mandated, but the fact that the bill prescribes any number at all. It is not good policy, and it certainly is wasteful in terms of limited dollars that we have to spend. The bill also unnecessarily continues the so-called 287G program, which in addition to being seriously flawed, is in fact obsolete and redundant with the full implementation of the Secure Communities program. I also have to register an objection to the general provisions related to abortion services for detainees that were added in full committee. They have no impact on ICE policies, but they unnecessarily interject a controversial issue into this bill. It has no place in this bill. It distracts us from what should be our focus. It strays far outside the lines of jurisdiction of the Homeland Security Appropriations Subcommittee. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'll be happy to answer any questions as well.
I thank the gentleman not only for his testimony, but thank the chairman of the committee for taking his time. The clerk is now handing to the gentleman, both of you, and I'm sorry, yes, we evidently do have two copies, the SAP, the Statement of Administration Policy, and if I could direct the chairman to the second page, I'm sorry, the third page, where it talks about additional concerns, and I would welcome feedback from either of you, but would go first to the committee chairman, the gentleman from Texas. I think I've gone to page 117 of the report that you have issued, but I'm not exactly sure what this section 529 discrepancy, or at least issue is. If the gentleman could take time to update the committee, and if the gentleman needs his report, I have that also in case that does reflect the same nature of the President's concern.
Mr. Chairman, I think that they've got the wrong section. I think 533 Gitmo is what they're objecting.
I took it that way, but then I took literally that they said section 529.
That's, what was 529? E-verified at airports.
Right, I saw that, and I was trying to relate it.
And,
I did not understand.
I think they've made it just a typo or section error.
Okay, Mr. Price, do you have any feedback related to this? I think probably you're seeing the SAP for the first time, as I am also, and I don't know whether we've entered it into the record yet, but I would ask, based upon
This is my first time, and it does appear there's
I would ask both, if I can, based upon both your feedbacks, I'd ask anyone that would choose to, and so I'll go to the gentlewoman, Mrs. Slaughter, and ask that she would clarify that, not necessarily now, but before we enter that into the record, if we could understand more clearly what that might be, if staff at any point has the ability to clarify.
I certainly don't. I would have to ask the administration what they have.
That's great.
But I would like to ask the unanimous consent to put it in the record.
Well, without objection, I would also ask the gentlewoman would please provide this committee in writing anything that clarifies or updates what this is, because both of the expert witnesses, I would say I'm asking for the gentlewoman to please clarify that. I think it's important, but
Mr. Chairman, I think it's pretty clear there's been a simple error in reference here, and I'd suggest if something's going to be put in the record that you give the administration a chance to correct it.
I'd like to.
I'm not trying to. I appreciate that. I don't think that I'm putting a demand on them to get it corrected immediately. I'm suggesting if the gentlewoman does have the ability to.
Let me say that
Gentlewoman's recognized. Well, I'm to the extent that the administration is willing to do that. I would tell the gentlewoman I'm trying to be flexible and open. I'm not trying to be hard-nosed about this, and I appreciate the gentlewoman. I'll let her advise us as we move forward, and I thank gentlewoman for that. I'm trying to simply clarify and appreciate that.
These provisions, both these provisions have been in the bill for several years.
Neither one of our witnesses can provide any information to that, and I will place that in the hands of the gentlewoman. Gentleman, Mr. Bishop's recognized.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you for coming here. Thank you for the work you're doing. And I appreciate my seatmate here being back here. Our prayers are still with you and your constituents. Chairman Carter, I got a couple of questions that I simply have to ask you that deals with a small portion of your particular bill, simply because I keep getting hit up by these, and you're the closest thing to an expert on it right now, so you get stuck with having to answer it. But there are a couple of things that takes place. First of all, it's been reported in some news outlets, and some of my constituents hit me up, that the Department of Homeland Security has been sending FPS, or Federal Protective Service officers, to various protest rallies that have been held around the state, some of them conducted by so-called Tea Party groups. As chairman of the Appropriations Committee and that funds these type of activities, are you aware of these reports, or are you doing anything to assist?
Mr. Bishop, I'm getting the same reports from my folks. I held 12 long-hour meetings over the break, and that came up several times. That organization, which there seems to be a concern that somebody's created a national police force. It's not the case. This is an organization whose job is to protect the federal properties, the buildings, basically, that we used to contract protection for the buildings. Now there's this around 2,000 person nationwide force that also contracts with contractors to basically protect the various buildings that are operated around the country. And at least the article that I read, the IRS protest that had all the vehicles that they took pictures of that said DHS, police force, that took place at the site of the IRS, which was a federal property. It has been reported to me, I have no knowledge of it personally, that they have at least responded other places, although the article that I read, it was federal property that demonstration took place on that. It was the land around the facility, but it was the federal property, which it is their duty to police that up.
Is your committee planning any kind of investigation into this?
I'm going to look into this. There is a story that I have not got, and I'm going to ask some questions about it, about a off-site event that they went to that was not on federal property, but I have no knowledge of that, and I'm going to check into that.
Good, I appreciate that. Sometimes there really is a legitimate, logical answer. But I
don't like the idea of police forces I don't know anything about either.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, then let me do the second one, which comes from the same group, and I said Friday I would ask you since you were going to be here on Sunday. I do appreciate you have Section 537 in the bill, and that is the right number. It deals with the purchase of ammunition, and the questions are always raised about the amount of ammunition that is purchased and the purpose for which that ammunition is purchased. Do you want to just explain what 537 does in your bill and the concept?
I'm glad you brought it up, and because it is a little peculiar to have it in here, but it is a hot topic everywhere I go of this story that DHS is buying up all the ammunition in the country. I am very blessed to have a DHS fellow in my office. I put him on it. He did a lot of really fine work. Glad to share it with anybody that wants to see it. And basically, we looked at the numbers. I am a shooter. I am a person who owns weapons, and I looked at the numbers for training rounds, and I have some questions about it. They have bought up and probably stockpiled some ammunition, but the reality is they're not buying up the ammunition. We contacted every ammunition manufacturer in the country. They all told us exactly the same story, and that is that the American people are buying ammunition in record numbers, that a shipment to any Walmart in the United States lasts no longer than 1 hour once it is received at any Walmart anywhere in the country. All certain popular rounds like 9mm, 40 caliber are off the shelves within 30 minutes. In fact, there's actually a website that you can go to that will give you the time of delivery for ammunition around the country and they also pointed out that military grade ammunition doesn't even compete with or in the same market with the ammunition that goes on the floor. The section, just to confirm, we're talking about section 567, not 537. And what we've done is let me finish my statement about our study. So, and in fact, some of the ammunition that we buy for our department, it doesn't even have polished brass. You can't sell in a store non-polished brass because people think there's something wrong with it. So our study shows that although we have some questions about the stockpile we have and whether there needs to be buying more, and so we've asked for information about training rounds, and how much they shoot at training rounds, how much they issue at training rounds. We don't want to get in a situation like the military did years ago where more ammunition was issued than was used, and then it suddenly went into the marketplace. We're trying to avoid all that, so we've asked for reporting from every agency that carries a weapon to give us a report to Congress. So we made it very clear as to what their usages are, what their purchases are, and the training programs they have. I was with ICE this week, and they told me they shoot 4 times a year, and they don't shoot near what is reported. So I think we're looking into it, and that's why we put that provision in this bill. We want them to know that we want to make it clear. We want them to have adequate supplies for their people and to get good prices, but we don't need to stockpile a bunch of it.
All right. Well, I appreciate that. It does seem consistent with some of the dealers who have talked to me about the same issue, and the idea of buying in bulk makes sense as well. But I appreciate the fact you're also looking into 567. Thanks a lot. I appreciate that. Let me ask one other area in which, help me out if I have not read this bill correctly. There was an effort back in 2010 and 2011 to transfer funds for mitigation purposes directly to Homeland Security, from Homeland Security to Interior, in which case those funds were transferred without Congress looking at it on either side. And I cannot find that language that allows that in your bill.
There's no such transfers.
That's perfect. But I do notice in your report language that you also have prohibited any mitigation funds that would be used for the purchase of additional property.
That's correct.
Okay. Well, and those are two things that I find very positive that happen to be in this particular bill. I know when Secretary Napolitano was first in office, she made a couple of prior statements that truly the Border Patrol is the great protector of the environment down on our border. And I have been there in purpose to see not only the garbage that is left behind, but also the lookout powers where obviously the drink of choice by those cartel lookouts are Diet Coke. If it was Dr. Pepper, I could understand and have some empathy, but it's Diet Coke, so I can't do anything there. And also seeing some of the other travesties that take place, especially the rape trees. So I appreciate the fact that actually the Border Patrol can give environmental protection in those particular areas, and they're very important. And I appreciate the fact that you have taken some changes within the language that was only there a couple of years to make sure that any kind of mitigation funds that are used are not going to be identified by both Congress on the Homeland Security Committee as well as the Interior Committee, and that gets a double view of what's taking place. So I'm glad that I couldn't find that in there. I'm glad you have taken care of that, and I think those are both positive changes in this appropriations. With that, I'll yield back.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bishop. Ranking Member Slaughter.
I'm glad you clarified the bullets. I have a number of constituents who are absolutely sure that Homeland Security's got all of them.
Yeah, and the numbers are pretty large. That's why I want this reporting factor. But there's no indication that that's what's causing the shortage. The indication is the American public are buying these calibers in record numbers.
Do you have any indication of where that rumor comes from?
Everybody wants to blame the government.
Yeah, well,
think it's
I think that's
MSNBC.
kind of the basis of where it comes from.
all right. I have no question.
Mr. Price?
Thank you, Mrs. Slaughter. Mr. Cole?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just quickly, first, thank both of you for your kind words. Much appreciated. And I had the opportunity to talk with the chairman actually from home, just to let him know what was going on, and he was kind enough to assure me then that it looked like we'd be in good shape and certainly would do what was necessary. So, again, I'm very grateful for that. I do want to ask you a philosophical question, or a policy question maybe, because I know both of you think about this a lot. In some ways, the disaster we're dealing with in my district is certainly not of the scope and the size of Sandy, for instance. So if you wanted to, in a sense, you probably could. You're talking maybe 2, 3, 4 billion. We don't know yet. But that is something that's sort of manageable to offset. On the other hand, when you're dealing with a Katrina or a Sandy, and we budget, and I think, most people don't realize Congress has begun budgeting and setting aside funds. And until Sandy came, we were pretty close to actually ending up with a surplus in that fund if we hadn't been hit by Sandy. But that swamped whatever, we would normally put aside. Nobody talks about $60 and $70 billion disasters and putting them aside. And I've always been for, what can we do to be prudent? I think most members are, honestly. But had we offset Sandy, that would have been a second sequester, in effect, one on top of another. So I'm just curious, looking forward, as we grapple with this, just what your thoughts are. I mean, there's the old, well, we don't offset major disasters, and maybe that's it. I mean, and I'm talking huge disasters, not smaller ones where we do try and budget. But are there any thoughts as to what we ought to be doing policy-wise to address these sorts of, once every 5 or 6 year things that are well beyond the scope of anything that can be predicted?
Well, we don't authorize on appropriations bills, so we basically fund what I think we got more than adequate funding in the bill as we are right now. There is still money sitting there, almost $11 billion, excuse me. I still have trouble with that B. And I can't get the T down at all. But that's the position of the committee. As far as authorizing is concerned, Mr. Price may have something he wants to say.
There has been a problem for years under both Democratic and Republican administrations of lowballing the disaster relief fund that is in the regular budget. I believe that those estimates need to be accurate as far as we can make them in terms of the normal run of disasters and the annual expectations that we have as to what we're going to have to meet. So it needs to be part of the regular budget process. Having said that, I think when an extraordinary disaster comes that really breaks out of those bounds, then I believe that's exactly the sort of circumstance that the emergency funding provisions are written for, and I think it's just impossible to insist on offsets at that point. I think we simply have to do what has to be done, and then longer range, of course, there's a continuing need to reduce the costs of even these mega disasters, to have more widespread insurance coverage, to have serious mitigation efforts, and so forth.
I won't take our time long, but I just have frankly a lot of respect for both of you as members that think about this. And while you're not authorizers, the reality is, as appropriators in this area, you effectively deal with this in a much more intimate way than most people do. Again, just appreciate your thoughtfulness. And as you think about this, I think the Congress would benefit greatly just on your reflections as to what we ought to do. Because, again, we can handle things our size in the normal course of events and what's in the disaster relief fund. You can't handle Sandy or Katrina and something like that. So it bears thinking about. And
Tom,
I'm sorry. I just would add quickly, Mr. Chairman, that obviously, we got hurricane season in front of us. You never know what can happen in that. So you could still find what's a fairly robust fund that you all have set aside overwhelmed at some point between now and September 30th.
You know, trying to predict what those crazy storms are going to do gets awfully tough. When I went and visited New York, they had everything in place to deal with a normal storm. They didn't get a normal storm.
Yeah.
You know, you didn't get a normal hurricane, a tornado. That was especially tornadoes are such bizarre things. They just, like they have a life of their own. We've dealt with them in our country for a long time, and we know them. But yeah, I think everybody conscientiously tries to make intelligent projections as best we can, and we will continue to do that.
Well, I appreciate what you gentlemen have already done, honestly, in your bipartisan work and setting aside the type of funds, not just for my area, but for every area that could deal with something like this. So thank you very much. Yield back.
I thank the gentleman very much. Gentleman from Massachusetts.
Thank you both for being here. We're running out of time, so I just want to say thank you. I have no questions.
Gentleman yields time. Gentleman, Mr. Woodall, gentleman in the air. Gentleman, Mr. Polis, no questions. Mr. Nugent. Mr. Webster, Chairwoman, Dr. Burgess. I want to thank both of you for taking time for the committee. It's obvious that we figured out that we're on votes and things are happening. On behalf of the committee, thank you very much to both of you. The gentlewoman, Mrs. Slaughter, has agreed to go ahead and to provide us. Gentlewoman's recognized.
Before you close the hearing, I would like to ask unanimous consent to insert the statement of Congresswoman DeLauro.
Without objection.
Thank you.
I want to thank both of you, and you're both excused.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. I'd like to now recognize continuing the really what might be 2216 section. We'll open that back up and have the gentlewoman, Mrs. Capter, and the gentleman from Maryland, Mr. Van Holland. Welcome to the committee. On behalf of the committee, we appreciate you both taking time to be for us today. The gentlewoman's recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Slaughter, and I will defer a moment to Congressman Van Hollen, I think, for an opening statement, and then I'll proceed with my statement. Thank you.
Gentleman's recognized.
I thank the gentlelady. I thank you, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Slaughter, members of the committee, for the opportunity to be here. And I'm offering two amendments as part of this appropriation bills. One amendment offered together with Ms. Capter and Ms. DeLauro that we're offering, one on the Homeland Security Appropriations Bill, the other one on the MilCon Appropriations Bill, and Ms. Capter is going to speak to that. I want to speak on the other amendment that I'm offering, which relates to the very process that we're operating under here. As you know, Mr. Chairman, the chairman of the Budget Committee just sent you a letter 2 days ago dated May 31st asking you to essentially adopt a rule that says because the Budget Conference Committee has not completed action, they want this House to assume for the purposes of moving forward on the budget that the House budget resolution is the Conference Committee report. In other words, they want you to deem the House budget to be the Conference Committee report for the purpose of moving forward. And I would submit to the members of the committee that is a total let's pretend approach to the budget. It would be one thing if we were to follow that procedure if the Senate did not have a budget. But this year, the Senate did adopt a budget, adopted a budget, I believe, about 72 days ago. The budget statute, the law governing the entire budget process, requires the conference committees to report by April 15th. So we as a Congress are in violation of the budget law right now. And what this resolution does, being proposed in terms of the rule, is really an attempt to skirt our obligations, to duck our obligations. Because right now, Mr. Chairman, as you know, the only reason we're not moving forward in terms of the conference on the budget is because the Speaker of the House has refused to name conferees to the budget. On the Senate side, the Democratic leader, Harry Reid, has now on 8 occasions tried to get unanimous consent to move forward on the budget conference. And each time, he has been blocked by a Republican senator. I'm sure we're all aware of the back and forth between Senator McCain and some of the Republican senators who blocked moving forward on the conference report. As Senator McCain said, he found it incomprehensible that Republicans wouldn't want to move forward on the budget, given the fact that we've spent the last 3 years listening to our Republican colleagues complain about the fact that the Senate didn't have a budget, we didn't have regular order. So my amendment is very simple. It's based on a piece of legislation I've introduced, has over 170 co-sponsors. I'll just read the operative phrase, sense of the Congress. It is the sense of the Congress, it is the sense of the House of Representatives that the Speaker should follow regular House procedure and immediately request a conference and appoint conferees to negotiate a fiscal year 2014 budget resolution conference agreement with the Senate. That's it. Follow regular order. Be transparent about the budget negotiations. Do what members on both sides of this body have said they want to do. Yes, there are big differences on the budget, but a budget conference is where you hash those differences out in a transparent manner, which is what our colleagues have said that they wanted to do. So I would really urge the committee to make this very simple amendment in order to send a signal that we all want to do what members have been saying for years that they want to do, which is go to conference on the budget, get a budget report in the right manner. And I'll just end, Mr. Chairman, by pointing out that the President has essentially issued a statement of position on both these appropriations bills, saying that unless they are adopted by this Congress in the context of an agreement on the overall budget number, not just for these appropriation bills, for everything, his senior advisors would recommend that he veto it. So it's in the interest of the country that we come together and try to negotiate this in a bipartisan way. That's essentially what the amendment I'm proposing would ask us to do.
Appreciate it, gentlemen. Does the gentlewoman wish to be recognized to be heard today?
I do, Mr. Chairman.
Gentlewoman,
Thank you, Chairman Sessions, Ranking Member Slaughter, and distinguished members of the Rules Committee. It's a pleasure to be before you today. What our amendments have in common is a call for regular order. And the amendment I am proposing would meet the diverse needs of our republic both equitably and responsibly. And rather than continue the irresponsible governance by across-the-board sequestration and a likely continuing resolution, I would urge you to support this amendment to provide necessary funding levels to support the needs of our nation following regular order and essentially tabling sequestration for the next 2 years, and by the adoption of this amendment, reducing the deficit by an additional $29 billion. I just wanted to put on the record, if I could, Federalist Paper 58, James Madison, who said, "The House of Representatives' power over the purse may in fact be regarded as the most complete and effectual weapon with which any constitution can arm the immediate representatives of the people, for obtaining a redress of every grievance and for carrying into effect every just and salutary measure." Why would I come before you today with my dear colleague, Mr. Van Hollen? And that is to say we are not operating by regular order, and this is a very dangerous course for us, not just as a Rules Committee or as an Appropriations Committee, but as the legislative branch of our government. We have turned far too much power over to the executive branch. This amendment attempts to go back to regular order. What's happening now is that the lack thereof is causing additional unemployment in this economy as these across-the-board, really untargeted cuts cut into growth. Just the University of Chicago, Austin Goolsbee estimates that sequestration will cut another 0.5% to 90% of a point in growth in our economy. We all know this, and we know what a cynical construct it is for America. I won't go through all of the statistics, but you know, to cut Meals on Wheels, while certain individuals in this country are earning incredible bonuses, many companies, including those in the oil and gas industry, the very large companies, and I represent big refiners, and I'm still saying this today, those in the agricultural community who are doing quite well right now and are very patriotic people, I think that we as a country have to come together. This amendment would essentially set sequestration aside for the next 2 years. It offers a balanced approach to deficit reduction. Why do I come before you today? I come before you because rules can actually, when we offer this amendment in the Appropriations Committee, they say, well, you know, you can't do that because part of the answer lies in the Ways and Means Committee. And it's as though if you have a head and you have a foot, they're not connected. So I come to the Rules Committee and ask that this very, very important committee put this country back on the right course. Support an amendment that actually has an opportunity to replace sequestration and reassume our powers as the legislative branch. I thank all of you for listening today.
I want to thank both of you, not only for your times, but majority of this afternoon, I'm sure, waiting for us to get to you. I also recognize, and I know both these members and important members in front of us do recognize, as well as the committee, that we are in the middle or almost to end our first vote. I'm going to go ahead and place us, recognize we have 2 votes, put us at the recess at this time, subject to call of the chair, which will be immediately after the second vote. Committee will be in recess. Okay, let's go vote.
I was actually
Well,
I think we should submit our questions in writing.
Somebody at RSC about it?
Usually the RSC and the conference collect these things. So,
Louise is trying. And thank you so very much to the members who have come back after the vote. Potentially right now, there may be a moment of silence that's being offered on behalf of the gentlewoman from Texas, Mrs. Sheila Jackson Lee, on behalf of the 4 firefighters who lost their lives in Houston, Texas. And so I would ask that we would take one moment of silence, if I can here, consistent with what's happened on the floor. Thank you very much. We're now going to come back to question. I believe that we had testimony that was done by both of you. Mrs. Capter, did you get an opportunity to finish appropriately your testimony before the committee? Mr. Van Hollen, did you have that chance? Because I think you did.
You're very kind. I did make mine brief. I didn't want to wear the committee out, but I was going to go through very briefly, some of the program cuts that are particularly hurtful. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, very much. Let me mention that there are still 12 million people officially unemployed in this country, and 1 out of every 4 Americans who does work works for under $10 an hour. We know the sequestration will mean that for those who need extended benefits in many places, those benefits will be cut. And we know that unemployment compensation is the most important infusion of economic muscle into our economy, because those dollars are spent on food and shelter and essentials. So sequestration really is a downdraft on investment in the economy for those people who remain out of work. We know that it's no secret 1 of 6 people in this country live in poverty. It is really distressing to experience that in many of the communities that I represent, and to see very destructive behavior in places where jobs are scarce. And yet we see dollars being cut in housing programs. Over 373,000 people with mental illness will completely lose services under these sequestration cuts. 600,000 women and children will be dropped from our nutrition programs. I mentioned earlier, Meals on Wheels, 4 million Americans, 4 million fewer meals to seniors. Imagine that. 30,000 low-income children without child care will further harm family development in our country. And I don't know about your communities, but there's a lack of police and fire in the communities that I represent, and they're in need of equipment. We have a backlog of Social Security disability claims across this country, and we know that in the construction sector, which is so important to recovery and transportation, with that collapse of the bridge in Washington, again, we're reminded that there are fragile parts of this infrastructure that need attention, and a part of the economy that can really produce jobs fairly quickly. And we probably have over close to 400,000 jobs at risk by the cuts that will occur in sectors that deal directly with infrastructure. So, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, I just wanted to say I think there's a much more intelligent way to run this country. I expect a lot of us here, and I actually expect a lot of the Rules Committee. I know the intelligence of its leadership, and maybe in the councils that you keep inside this institution, you can actually bring the separate pieces together to produce a more reasonable alternative than the regimen under which we are living. It is not constructive, and it is not doing the best that we can do, as the Federalist Papers would hope, and that is to use the power of the purse effectively and under regular order. I thank you so very much. Please support this amendment.
Thank the gentlewoman. Did the gentleman from Maryland wish to have further discussion with the committee?
The only thing I would add is the amendment that the gentlelady is offering would replace the sequester for fiscal year 2014 with a mix of cuts and cuts to tax breaks that would achieve the same amount of deficit reduction over a different period of time, and also add $30 billion, as the gentlelady said, to reducing the deficit on top of replacing the sequester.
I thank both of you not only for taking time to provide this important committee with your testimony and your feedback, but also for the amount of time that you sat through listening to others as they prepared themselves and gave testimony today. I thank both of you very much. I will tell you that I, too, am concerned about the number of people who are unemployed and underemployed in this country. And during a period of time where I did extensive travel across this country, as the gentleman from Maryland had done, I was in community after community where I would talk and listen to people, and am very concerned about where we are. Today, both of you are here to once again press issues that you know are important, and so do I. I hearken back to some of the experiences that I have had and presently do have, and that is of examples across the country of success and where success is found, and examples where failure or what I would consider to be problems exist. And I would point to probably the two best examples of Texas, my home state, and the state of Illinois, which is the President's home state. The President's home state essentially is in their demise of excessive spending, huge overtaxation, what I believe, which has pushed people out of the state of Illinois, has caused them to run into a myriad of issues, up to and including writing IOUs to their state universities rather than being able to pay universities. They're cutting mental health. They're cutting education. Meanwhile, in Texas, where year after year after year we have millions of people who enjoy the benefits of a robust economy, we find ourselves putting millions more into education, millions more into mental health, a more robust economy where we balance our budget, where we have taken simply a different way to look at what government should do, taxation policy, and big government. And the people of Texas, I believe, have shown the United States, people of the United States, not only that we are prepared for the future and prepared to do business, but have done this with 16 or 17 other states who have, when given same circumstances, have chosen not to tax, not to spend, not to put unions in charge, not to follow the model of Illinois, which is the President's home state. And yet I think what we're seeing is the President has chosen, since he's been elected, to choose that exact same methodology as is done in Illinois, his home state, of more rules, more regulations, more spending, more misery. And I think the misery index of the United States has gone up dramatically when compared to what might be considered a Republican proposals that President Clinton and President Bush pushed that sustained our economy, notwithstanding President George W. Bush, 60 straight months worth of economic growth. And I think that that's what our country does need. It needs a chance to look at models. So the state of Illinois stands as Exhibit A, and probably the state of Texas stands right there with it, perhaps Exhibit B, of two different directions that government can choose. I think the government that we've chosen here, the people have chosen with the House of Representatives, is one where we will be a stopgap measure instead of continuing the runaway taxing and spending that has endangered some 25 million people who are underemployed or unemployed today, with more welfare to hand out to people, notwithstanding they need help, but people who are able-bodied Americans being talked into by this government into sitting back and not finding jobs because they're scared of their future. And all these things combine to show me that I think that what we ought to do is educate the American people. Education's never been more important, but it should be on economics and decision-making that can take place at the local level, perhaps it's at a city level, perhaps it's at a state level, but certainly at a national level too. And that is, the further we slide into the demise of this country, we place the future, which are our children and grandchildren, in a bullseye that they, I think, will have a very, very difficult time of working themselves out of a deficit that is destructive to us paying for. And as we've seen in the debate that's taking place on student loans right now, just the guess from those economists in the government who are saying interest rates would rise. They're going to rise at some time, and that means that everything, including student loans that we have to pay for, could literally make it the cost unbearable for people in the future. And so the signs are there today. The signs are there not only in looking at Europe, but they're right here in front of us today. So you being here and presenting the ideas on behalf of the Democratic Party, our President of the United States, about a direction that you'd like to go is very appropriate and certainly welcome before this committee. And I think that we do have a collective wisdom about how we do want to look at what we do, what kind of model we would follow, and what's best available to us. So I thank both of you for being here today. Lastly, I would note that the gentleman was in reference to the letter that I received dated May 31 from the Honorable Paul Ryan, the Chairman of the House Budget Committee, where he did speak to me and, in essence, look for my ideas about concurrence, about how we would move forward in lieu of us having a lack of agreement on the budget and the conference. I've agreed with the chairman. I've written him back. Both of these letters are available to members of the committee. And I've chosen that I will follow his advice and what I believe is sound to say that we will put in writing these numbers that we've got today with the knowledge that they may change tomorrow, but that we're going to place before this committee that authority and a responsibility with the ideas that the Budget Committee Chairman places with us on these two appropriations bills that we do. And so I thank the gentleman for being in reference to that. His ideas as the ranking member on the Budget Committee, he is very aware of these. His relationship with the gentleman, Mr. Ryan, he understands well that we have a very solid person there who is seeking resolution, who is doing his best to make sure that he is open and transparent, that his letter to me was not one that would only be between the two of us, some quiet agreement, but rather one which we as an entire body would be aware of. My concurrence back, I hope, is seen the same way. So I thank both of you for being here with your thoughts and ideas. A gentleman from Utah is recognized.
I only have one procedural question, so please don't answer anything. Mr. Chairman, as I understand, if this were an open rule, would these amendments then not be considered germane on the floor? So the request here for both amendments is for a waiver. Is that it? That's the purpose?
That would be
that's all I want to know. Thank you.
Mrs. Slaughter?
Well, we know that we do give waivers for an awful lot of things, but we're not going to do it today. But I'm very concerned. Appreciate your coming up, Ms. Capter. I know that we've brought to the floor several times the request to do what Mr. Van Hollen had asked, to lift the sequestration. And I spent a good bit of time, as I'm sure we all did, with early education and people who were ill. But I'm somewhat perplexed about the idea that we're going down the road to disaster, because all the signposts I see, this country's doing pretty well. The deficit is down to, what, $642 billion, Mr. Van Hollen? From $1 trillion, this is pretty good work, and that the unemployment is down, and all the sign points are good, and we're doing pretty well. But in spite of the fact that we've never passed a jobs bill here, and we've done very little to help people find work, and we are certainly going to double the rates for loans for college loans. But I'm going to tell you what really am troubled. I'm troubled by this Chairman Ryan, and I say that, and I have to confess right off the top that when we did the health care bill, and I chaired this committee, that we came very close to doing some deeming. I don't know if you all remember, but it was known as the slaughter solution. And I've got a cartoon in my office that I absolutely cherish. It's an elephant holding in its right cartoon hand a sheaf of papers, and in its left cartoon hand a huge meat cleaver. And the caption is, they call theirs a slaughter solution for health care. We just call our slaughter. What I'm worried about, what I really need to know, is if we vote for this rule, and if we vote for these bills, are we deeming that Mr. Ryan's budget is the budget of the land? Is that what you understand we're doing here? Without any conference? Because I didn't support that budget because of what it did to Medicare and numbers of other things. So,
Ms. Large, as you indicated, you at first had proposed that, but you did not, and then pursuing that deeming resolution. I think that's important to understand for the record. But this is a deeming resolution. What this does is say that we're going to pretend, for the purposes of our process, that the House-passed budget is in fact the conference committee budget. That's what it's going to deem the House Republican budget to be the conference committee budget for the purpose of House Budget Appropriations Committee action.
So then there would be no call for a conference committee. We would just have the budget.
Well, that's right, and that's why this amendment,
I think it's terribly important, really, to understand that, because I think a lot of our colleagues would be very much surprised to hear that if they vote for Homeland Security and for the Veterans Administration, that they're voting that Paul Ryan's budget is the law of the land. And it certainly gives a lot of us pause, I would think. I appreciate a lot what you've tried to do. We wouldn't let you to the floor ever. You never got a waiver on any of this. But without causing all this pain and anguish, as I recall, it was the Buffett rule, the $4 billion we give oil companies to encourage them to drill, and there was a third one.
That's right. It was to cut the direct payments in agriculture subsidies where we're paying people whether they're in tough times or not.
And that would raise the same amount of money the sequester required and not cause all this grief.
That's right. And on top of that, reduce the deficit. In addition to replacing the sequester, it would reduce the deficit by $30 billion more.
Well, I feel really sorry that you, as the ranking member of the budget and as captor on the Appropriations Committee, that you can't get any action in this room. It really is a sorry shame to me because of the world about the sequestration. Business people, that's all they want to talk to me about at home. And it seems absolutely unbearable to me, almost an insult to the two of you, that despite your good standing here and in your positions of power and what you're doing here, that you can't get an amendment out of this Rules Committee. And certainly, I think the reason why is that people are afraid they'd pass. But I'm sure that's what it's going to be. But I will tell you, we've got to make it really clear before this vote comes up on Thursday, the last one here, yours is on the first bill, the VA bill, then we got to make sure overnight that our colleagues understand that what they're doing is voting to make the Ryan budget the budget of the United States. Thank you for coming. Thank you for your persistence. I appreciate very much what you're trying to do and agree with it completely.
Gentleman yields her time. Vice Chairman of the Committee, Mrs. Fox.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank both my colleagues for being here, and I have no questions. Thank you.
Mr. McGovern.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. Mr. McGovern, would you yield a moment? Would you? No, Mr. McGovern, I just happened to remember something I needed to say. Would you yield? Thank you. I wanted to introduce two guests that I have today, and I apologize, Mr. Chairman. We have an exchange student from China who's attending Appalachian State University, Nancy, and Dr. Joe Bryan, who has brought her here. Nancy saved Dr. Bryan's life when he was in China teaching there, and she wanted to be an exchange student here. Our office was able to help a little bit, and so he is showing her the East Coast. She studied at Appalachian this past semester and made straight A's and has done very well, and I'm really pleased that they chose to spend a little time in the Capitol and wanted to observe the Rules Committee. I had them in the chamber, in the gallery, observing, and I told them I was coming back in. They said they'd like to come back in, too. So I'm proud that they are here. Thank you very much. I apologize, and thank Mr. McGovern.
We welcome you. Thank you for being here. Thank you. We've been here, people have been here for a long time, so I don't want to take up very much time. So I just want to make the point. I think the question that we need to confront is whether or not the majority in this House are interested in governing or not. I mean, they pass sequestration, and then they don't want to take responsibility for sequestration. They voted for it, but it's President Obama's idea or somebody else's idea, but they voted for it. They don't want to take responsibility for fixing it. On the budget, we were told we went through this kind of theater of the absurd when we passed this amendment saying no pay without a budget. You know, the House passed the budget, which I don't like. The Senate passed the budget, which I prefer more than the House. So the next thing you would expect, given all the talk about no pay and stuff, that you would go to conference. They don't want to go to conference. They moved the goalpost again. And the reason why they don't want to go to conference is because I don't think they want to have a national discussion about what really is in their budget proposal and what they would cut and the jobs that it would cost and the hurt that it would cause. And so, you know, I appreciate both of you being here. There's no chance in hell that they're going to vote to make your amendments in order, but we, you know, if we were truly interested in governing at this particular point, we'd be at a minimum going to conference on the budget. And it wouldn't be some sort of backroom deal where we're going to have to meet quietly so that the American people don't get a chance to see what's going on, and we'll decide all the details of the budget that way. That's not the way this is supposed to work. So I thank you for being here. I support your amendments, but I can probably predict with some certainty that they don't. So thank you.
Gentleman yields his time. Chairman Cole. Thank you very much, Judge Hastings.
Mr. Chairman, my understanding is that I will manage the rule, and in light of that, I will have very little to say here, except I can't fundamentally agree with the things that I heard you say in your soliloquy, Mr. Chairman. The people that are on welfare in this country, a great majority of them would prefer to be working. And I don't think they've caused the problems in this country. I think they've been victims of the problems caused by those more privileged in our society, and especially those that control resources without participating in what I believe is appropriate for all of us as citizens, and that is paying appropriate taxes. I, too, along with 3 other members of this committee, come from a state that has no income tax. And we've had a lot of people gravitate to the state of Florida largely for the sunshine, and that factor alone. I asked Don King once, why did he move to Florida? And he said, because y'all don't pay no taxes. And that's why he moved there. I guess that meant that he had paid a lot of taxes in Ohio and New York. But I think you misunderstand something, Mr. Chairman. When you have oil refineries and oil pumping all over Texas for beyond your lifetime and mine, then you assuredly must recognize that you live in a fortunate area of the country where, for example, Illinois does not have all of those natural resources. I think you need to pay attention to our friends on Wall Street and their actions with debentures and junk bonds and hedge funds and new concoctions that have caused this country's ultimate deterioration. And for anybody, Democrat or Republican, that takes advantage of the tax system that we have and park their money offshore, they don't have my respect. I pay my taxes. All of y'all in here pay your taxes, and damn sight they should pay theirs.
Appreciate the dialogue from the gentleman from Florida. Gentleman from Georgia recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Kaptur, you talked very passionately about the importance of reclaiming the responsibility that this Congress has for legislating, and that whenever we fail to meet that responsibility, it cedes power to the executive, which if we, not just Federalist 58, but we could go through the whole stack, and time again, folks are worried about the unchecked power of the executive. I've been here 2.5 years as a member, but much longer as a staffer before that. I can't remember the last time we've passed all the appropriations bills, conferenced all the appropriations bills, and gotten those bills signed by a President of the United States. Have either of you all been here long enough to remember the last time we succeeded in meeting that legislative responsibility?
When I began my career here, we did it with dispatch every year. And it was, I understood what regular order was. I feel sorry for you, because you have lived through permanent disorder. And all I can tell you is it takes great leadership from those in charge. And when that fails, we fail as a country. And so sadly, things began to break down about 15 years ago, a little bit over that. But it doesn't have to be that way. And I've been given the blessings of serving in Congresses that really worked, and there's no better feeling. And I'll tell you what, the other thing is, we used to have great fun in terms of we would travel to one another's districts. I remember going with one Republican from New Mexico, Joe Skeen. I admired him very much. And he came to my district. Our districts were so different, but we benefited by getting to know one another, the challenges. I remember when I got off at the tarmac at his little airport down there. Well, actually, it was an airstrip. There wasn't any airport. And I kind of wandered off into the grass, and sort of your part of the country. He goes, "Get back on the tarmac. There's rattlers out there." I said, oh, my goodness. I learned something about his district. And so we represented very different parts of America. About my part of America, I said, "Well, Joe, what do you think?" He says, he's looking at the agriculture in our region. He goes, "Intense." And so we had, but I appreciated why he ran. I appreciated more about his district, the types of challenges that he faced. And then when we got into negotiations, we served on agriculture together, we actually could talk to one another. I miss that so much. I remember when Bob Michael and Tip O'Neill used to sing to the President during the holidays at the end of the year. That could never happen now. And something really destructive. I feel sorry for you younger members, you newer members, because you really haven't known when Ileana and I were first here. We know what that world is like, and we need to be there again. But the human relations have broken down, and so then the institution breaks down. And that isn't fair to the people of the country. We have a long way to go to mend bonds, and it starts with personal attachment. Our committees don't travel outside of Washington anymore. Maybe one of yours does. But we used to go to districts. We actually learned the substance of what we were doing, and we become captives of the Capitol now in our own separate camps. And it really doesn't help the Republic. It actually hurts it very much. So I believe you can only heal this when you heal the human relations that are at the core of anything that works. If you don't have teamwork, you don't get a good result. And that's what we've been enduring now for a very long time. So it's become way too I don't even want to say partisan, almost hyper-ideological or something. And I don't think that's good and the country knows it isn't good. And it's within our power to change it. And that's why we appeal to you. Maybe our proposal isn't perfect, but I think it's closer than the way we're living now. And so I just encourage you as a newer member, your goodwill, to get to know some of those in the other party on your committees, get to know their districts, get to know the perspective that they're coming from. And until you know that, we won't be successful. Thank you for allowing me to say that.
I know there's a lot of wisdom in what you say. I serve on a committee with Mr. Van Hollen and Mr. Ryan, who are both very serious members who work very hard at something that's very difficult to do. As I listened to your opening presentation, you said we're making cuts to Meals on Wheels while others receive outrageously large bonuses. And I thought, yes, in my part of the world, in my district, it would never dawn on me when we're trying to solve a very real problem in our community that problem is in any way related because someone else in that community has been successful. We would certainly call on that person who's been successful to join us in a community-wide effort to solve that. Meals on Wheels is a neat example because, of course, that was a local program, began in local communities here in the 50s. Well, began in Britain, but came here in the 50s and grew one local community at the time. I know, have a heartfelt concern for policemen and firefighters and having the equipment and the resources they need to perform their jobs in their communities. In my community, it's the Lawrenceville City Police Department. It's the Gwinnett County Fire Department. It's the Forsyth County Sheriff's Department. And these have been local departments since we were the fourth state to join the Union centuries ago. And so it never dawns on us that there would be a Washington role to play in making these things happen. State of Florida chooses not to have an income tax and is able to fund its needs. Our millage rates are probably above average in my part of the world because we're working to provide services locally. So come to these issues. It's unbelievable to me as we look at the budget and the budget committee that out of $3.6 trillion, yes, if we all sat down around a table, we couldn't find a way to solve that together. Though Mr. Van Hollen had that opportunity 2 years ago, and I'm sure gave it his very best. And
would my colleague yield when he finishes?
I'd be happy to yield to my friend, who I welcome back. And I will say, as you were speaking tonight, I realized how much I'd missed you these last few meetings.
Thanks a lot. I just want to disabuse you of the notion that Florida is meeting its needs. I don't think it is. I'm 76 years old, lived there virtually all of my life. And I've seen those changes, and I don't believe that our failure, even though we have two members here who served in the legislature, neither of whom would have supported an income tax, or had I been in the legislature, Florida would have an income tax. And I think we would be better able to meet our needs in that regard. And I don't want an answer, but I'll bet you Forsyth and Gwinnett County were standing in the line in their police department when we did the COPS program. I'll bet you they were there when we did the programs for equipment for them. And just to give you an idea of a place that's controlled by others, this place that we're in, Washington, D.C., God help us if we have serious fires. These people do not have an adequate fire department. And I gather that they do expect a national response. I see what happened in Tom's district as close to me and as part of my responsibility. I don't see it as just his responsibility. And when you have the same thing in yours, I would feel the same way. Marcy's statement should be taken to heart by all of us who are doing a terrible disservice by believing that there's something wrong with having a government that functions pretty doggone good when we need it, and then we are critical of it when we want to be. Thank you very much for yielding.
Thinking about the responsibilities that Congress has, Mr. Van Hollen, you've been doing this a long time. In the absence of beginning the process this week by naming the numbers in the House-passed budget as those, what they call the 302A, 302B numbers, if we don't begin that process, knowing that we haven't completed the appropriations process in well over 15 years now, and knowing how important it is that we do complete that process, do you have any hope that if we delay this weeks or months longer in hopes of finding an agreement in conference, that we will achieve that goal of reclaiming the congressional power and passing those appropriations bills?
Well, Mr. Woodall, as you know, we'll never know the answer to that question if we don't go to conference. And it has now been a long, long time since the House passed its budget and the Senate passed its budget. We're way overdue in terms of the budget statute, which says we should have a conference committee report by April 15th. So that's the process, right? That's the regular order. All we're proposing is that we in this House abide by the regular order. I can't think of a better way to get an agreement overall on the budget than the House and the Senate trying to resolve their differences in a transparent way through budget conference.
Your point is well taken, and it's one that I don't dispute, though my question was knowing that if we went to conference now, we would not find agreement by Thursday. What we're doing in naming these 302A, 302B numbers is giving us an opportunity to pass appropriations bills here in the House, pass appropriations bills that will then have to be conferenced with the Senate so that we can reclaim that congressional prerogative to designate the spending, knowing that we can't succeed in conference. Your point notwithstanding, your amendment won't help us succeed by Thursday.
No, Mr. Woodall, I'm not. This doesn't defeat the underlying bill. I have problems with the underlying bill. This amendment just says, let's go to conference on the budget. And if you agree with that proposition, and I think you might, then we should allow this House to work its will and put this amendment in order and send a signal that we want to go to conference.
Unquestionably, I know that's the point that you're making. I'm asking for your budget expertise, though. With that amendment, without that amendment, either way, we need to get going on the appropriations process, which we can't do without 302A and 302B numbers. I think you know that also. We could wait for a conference. I feel like we're doing the more responsible thing by going ahead and getting the ball started down the road. Your point is we should do the responsible thing and get started down the conference road also. Fair point.
Well, like 60 days ago. That's all I'm saying, Mr. Woodall.
Fair point.
And if not, then now.
But today our challenge is beginning the appropriations process. Would you agree with me that we can't begin that process without designating some 302A and 302B numbers?
Oh, you have to have numbers, but the whole point of going to conference is to get numbers that provide the overall framework so the House and the Senate can move forward together and actually get appropriation bills at the end of the day, as you know, Mr. Woodall. So, I mean, all this does is put the House, we've already passed the House budget. You're just saying, instead of the conference committee budget, you're going to deem the House budget to be the budget of the entire Congress, the conference committee report. And, it is a device that's being used to allow the House to move forward because we don't have a conference committee report. And one of the reasons we certainly couldn't have the option of getting a conference report, you don't even go to conference. That's all we're saying. So better late than never. Let's have an opportunity to vote on it.
Will the gentleman allow me to comment on the law enforcement issue? And you've been very generous, Mr. Chairman, with your time. But I can tell you in the part of the country that I come from, and we're right up on the border with Canada, so we come from different regions. Local law enforcement cannot solve some of the challenges that we face. The drug trade that is targeted at us, that is coming from outside and has infected our community like locusts, is resulting in rising homicides across the region that I represent. A couple days ago, a dead body was found in a car a block away from where we live. I live in a working-class neighborhood, the western end of my district, all right? And I'm sure it was gang retaliation. But I can tell you that the problem doesn't start where we live, but it's coming from elsewhere. And it's in the rural areas that I've represented as well with methamphetamine, and Hal Rogers knows full well what's going on in this country in the rural areas and how that stuff is moving into communities in a manner that We've never experienced anything like that in our lives. We have also at the border that I represent challenges with terrorists who can come over the line, where now we have Border Patrol where we didn't before, and we are getting used to the relationship of federal law enforcement working with local law enforcement who need them on many occasions. So we are functioning differently because, frankly, our society has changed. And perhaps some of the communities I represent can manage just with their own little law enforcement officials. But I can tell you that every sheriff that I represent, I mean, I've gone out to township meetings with our first responders, and they're being asked to handle situations. Frankly, they don't have interoperability equipment. We've tried to get as much as we could for them to handle some of the situations that they do with boardings on vessels. I represent the state with the second largest number of boat licenses in the country, and those boats float on water. We have major issues in our region dealing with law enforcement, and no community is isolated anymore. So when you said, yes, you took care of it yourself, well, I'm glad there are places like that left. I just don't happen to represent them. And so we each appeal for the needs of our region, and in our case, I wish we didn't need to have this other level. Our way of life has changed, but conditions have changed. And so there is a more collaborative relationship between our township, our local municipalities, our counties, state, and federal law enforcement. Thank you for listening.
Sure. I must wonder how much more effective the federal government would be if it focused strictly on those federally related issues that you have just described, if we would do better at those things that we chose to focus on, if we weren't so spread out across other issues. I didn't have the pleasure of serving on this committee before the television cameras went in. That was one of the openness initiatives that David Dreyer, our past chairman, brought forward. But I think about making the Paul Ryan budget the law of the land. I know that the ranking member of the Budget Committee knows that the budget never becomes the law of the land, that what we're doing in this bill we have to do to move forward as a Congress, to pass appropriations bills, to begin that process this week. There is no other way to begin that process this week. And that the only effect this has is setting numbers that we here will use internally to begin what is our internal budget process. Thinking about the relationships, Ms. Capter, that you talked about, we'll have an opportunity on the floor tomorrow as we begin this debate, which is an important debate, and there's certainly some divisive issues in this debate, but we'll have a chance to hear the rhetoric tomorrow and see if it accurately reflects what we all know to be the nature of what we're doing and why we have to do it, and what we'd like to see happen differently and what hasn't happened differently, or whether it becomes a public relations discussion. And instead, I, like you, am sometimes saddened when I show up for work, and it feels more like we're in the debate club than we're in the sitting around the table at the Rotary Club trying to solve a community problem. But we heard from our chairman and ranking members earlier on these appropriations bills. These are so important, and they speak so directly to needs that we all have in our communities. And, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate you doing what you can to move these to the floor this week and give us the best chance possible of using our priorities, Republicans and Democrats, North and South, East and West, our priorities in federal spending rather than the administration's. I thank you. I yield back.
Gentleman yields his time. Gentleman, floor is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I just wanted to talk about, I guess, my good friend, Mr. Hastings from Florida. We're both from Florida. I lived in Illinois that has an income tax. I saw what Illinois is doing today, where they, a year ago they raised the income tax rate because they're in debt. I saw today that Illinois now increased their budget by $2 billion, while they still have an $8 billion shortfall in what they owe. And that tax rate sunsets in 2015. My good friend said if he was in charge of Florida, we'd have a state income tax. But I would suggest to you that state income tax is not the end-all, because in Illinois, that was kind of what they sold folks in Illinois back when they passed state income tax. And today, they're in debt by $8 billion. Florida is at least living within their means. Now, it may not be perfect, but I will tell you, having worked as a sheriff and having been a sheriff, elected sheriff in Florida, we work within our means. Did we ever take advantage of a federal grant? Yes. But understand, the federal grants go away. It still requires that municipality to fund it. It's not we fund it and it's there forever. And that's part of the problem when you do federal grants, is that it does run out. And then the community is responsible to pick up the tab. So it is not a perfect system. While federal grants have their place, it's not the end-all, and the federal government shouldn't be the end-all, because local municipalities and counties and states are responsible for the areas that they represent. While they have to work with the federal government, particularly on border issues, because the federal government has greater resources as it relates to the border, it is their responsibility to protect the borders of the United States. Not the states. It's the federal government's responsibility. So I just want to make sure that when we start talking about states, every state's different. But I have lived in a state with an income tax, worked in that state with an income tax, and then moved to a great state of Florida that does not have. And I would suggest to you, having lived in both states, that I'll take Florida every day of the week. Thank you. And I yield back.
Gentleman yields back his time. Gentleman from Florida, gentleman, Mr. Webster is recognized.
I don't have any questions, Mr. Chairman. I do have one observation, and I just want to, I think I'm understanding this correctly. I personally have used behind closed doors, as you know, Mr. Chairman, and publicly tried to do everything I could to promote regular order, because I think it's the right thing to do. But I think it's ironic that on one hand, we're asked to vote for an amendment that would promote regular order, and on the other hand, we'd vote for an amendment that would butcher regular order, circumventing committees, circumventing the process, circumventing the hundreds of members who would be voting, and allowing a group of 13 members to basically say, we don't care what those committees think, or even that you're constituted to take care of these issues, we just want to circumvent you. Anyway, I just thought it was interesting that we want to get back to regular order, we want to butcher it. Matter of fact, not only that, it violates every germanity rule ever written from common law through Jefferson and Mason's manuals to now. So I think we're being asked to vote on one hand, to vote to get back to regular order. On the other hand, we're voting on issues and taxes and spending and other things that have nothing to do with these bills. So anyway, just an observation.
Gentleman yields time. Gentlewoman, Chairwoman.
Thank you. This certainly is a thoughtful and insightful debate, Mr. Chairman, but the Miami Heat are about to play the decisive Game 7, tip-off time any moment now, so we can speed this along. That would be greatly appreciated.
If the gentlelady would yield for a minute. Now, I will have to go back to one thing, the Blackhawks and the Cup.
Reclaiming my time. That's just really. So this is it. Tonight's the night, Mr. Chairman.
Gentlewoman yields back her time. Gentleman from Texas, Dr. Birch, recognized.
Well, look, following behind three Floridians, I will just associate myself with the remarks of the chairman as he started out in the committee, and that the rest of the country is well served by having Texas's contribution to our national numbers, both in employment and GDP. It would be a much more dire situation were the Texas numbers subtracted from the national numbers. As far as the playoffs are concerned, I will point out that the San Antonio Spurs swept their series, so they are awaiting. And I yield back.
Gentleman yields back his time. Chairman does recognize we've allowed ourselves the appropriate time. Not only hear from Ms. Capter, but also the gentleman, the distinguished gentleman, Mr. Van Hollen. I would make several notes here. I came to Congress on the heels of Tim Penny, who thought they weren't such great times, and that was one of the reasons why I ran. Secondly, the gentleman who is your staff director, Mr. Van Hollen, Mr. Kahn, has been a very dear friend of mine for 15 years, as well as the young ranking member himself, who I've shared my family with, and many of the highs and lows of some of my tenure with the gentleman. And I do believe personal relationships make a huge difference, and I enjoy Chris Van Hollen very much and have shared both of these gentlemen. Next, as it relates to the substance of the matter, you will hear us in a minute talk about Section 3 of the rule, but it refers directly to what has been at issue tonight, and that is this letter that the distinguished gentleman, Paul Ryan, sent to me on May 31st. And I would simply say, he says in here, first and third paragraph, I'm asking that the rule include a provision that adopts the House-passed budget resolution as an interim budget request. And then on the second page, I want to emphasize this is a request for an interim measure. We are utilizing this, and I responded back in the light of day, as I said here and it's in the member's packet, that what we're trying to do here is move the House of Representatives forward. So I appreciate both of you taking time. As always, I hope we did well enough to where you want to come back and see us, as opposed to the reverse. I thank both of you for being here, and you're both excused. Thank you very much. As a result of seeing no further member available for discussion before the committee, I will now close the hearing, pending which time we take that phone call. And I would close this measure, H.R. 2216 and H.R. 2217. Chairman, be in receipt of a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move the committee grant H.R. 2216, the Military Construction and Veterans Affairs and Related Agencies Appropriations Bill 2014, and H.R. 2217, the Department of Homeland Security Appropriations Act 2014, open rules. The rule provides 1 hour of general debate on each bill, equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Appropriations. The rule waives all points of order against consideration of each bill. The rule waives points of order against provisions in each bill for failure to comply with Clause 2 of Rule 21, except for Section 563 of H.R. 2217. The rule provides that each bill shall be considered for amendment under the 5-minute rule. The rule provides that the chair may accord priority and recognition to members who have pre-printed their amendments in the congressional record. The rule provides one motion to recommit each bill with or without instructions. Finally, Section 3 of the rule provides that pending the adoption of a concurrent resolution on the budget for fiscal year 2014, the provisions of House Concurrent Resolution 25 as adopted by the House shall have force and effect in the House as though Congress has adopted such concurrent resolution, and the allocations of spending authority printed in Tables 11 and 12 of House Rule 113-17 shall be considered for all purposes in the House to be the allocations under Section 302A of the Congressional Budget Act of 1974.
Chairman, appreciate your motion, gentlemen. Chair would now recognize the gentleman from Florida for discussion about the rule. Gentleman's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Both of these bills, H.R. 2216 and 2217, will be considered as traditional open rules. So that means any member of either side that wants to offer any amendment within the rules of the House of Representatives can do so if they want to perfect it or make it change some things that they think are bad about it. They've at least got that opportunity. As requested by the Chairman of the Judiciary, the rule for the Homeland measure allows a point of order to be raised against the authorization provision relating to the Brazilian visas contained in the bill.
You've now heard from the gentlewoman. The motion is on the floor, and the gentleman's discussion of the motion. Gentleman's recognized.
The Chairman Goodlett from the Judiciary Committee requested that the rule allow for a point of order against that provision.
Does the gentleman seek further information on this matter? Yes, sir. Good. Thank you. So the gentleman rightly asked a question about some clarification, and the gentleman did offer that response. The gentleman seemed satisfied with that. We now would engage in the motion that's before the committee. Or is there any further discussion or amendment?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment to the rule. I move the committee strike Section 3 of this rule and replace it with Representative Van Hollen's amendment, which would call on the Speaker to follow regular House procedure and immediately request a conference and appoint conferees to negotiate a fiscal year 2014 budget resolution conference agreement with the Senate.
You've now heard the amendment from Gentlewoman Mrs. Slaughter. The chair would like to engage in a quick dialogue here, and that is that the gentleman, the chairman of the Budget Committee, Mr. Ryan, has notified me, and we've had numerous discussions about the chairman engaging the Senate on a conference, trying to work through the many issues that are there, and at this time I would say that I would oppose the gentlewoman's amendment. Further discussion? Those in favor of the Slaughter amendment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no.
No. Roll call.
Noes have it. Roll call.
Ms. Fox? No. Ms. Fox? No. Mr. Bishop? No. Mr. Cole? Mr. Cole? No. Mr. Woodall? No. Mr. Woodall? No. Mr. Nugent? No. Mr. Nugent? No. Mr. Webster? Mr. Webster? No. Ms. Ross-Lehtinen? No. Ms. Ross-Lehtinen? No. Mr. Burgess? Mr. Burgess? No. Ms. Slaughter?
Aye.
Ms. Slaughter? Aye. Mr. McGovern? Mr. Hastings? Mr. Hastings? Aye. Mr. Polis? Mr. Chairman?
No.
Mr. Chairman? No.
Clerk report.
2 yeas, 9 nays.
The amendment is not agreed to. Further amendment or discussion? The gentleman's recognized.
I have an amendment to the rules, and I move the committee make an order en bloc and give the necessary waivers for the amendments by Mr. Van Hollen and Ms. Capter, number 1, and Mr. Van Hollen, number 2.
You have now heard the amendment from the gentleman from Florida. Further discussion? Those in favor of the gentleman's amendment signify by saying aye. Those opposed, no.
No.
The noes have it. Noes have it. Okay, we now move to an agreement on the motion from the gentlewoman from Grandfather, North Carolina. Those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no.
No.
The ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Roll call, please.
Roll call.
Ms. Fox?
Aye.
Ms. Fox? Aye. Mr. Bishop? Mr. Bishop? Aye. Mr. Cole? Mr. Cole? Aye. Mr. Woodall? Aye. Mr. Woodall? Aye. Mr. Nugent? Aye. Mr. Nugent? Aye. Mr. Webster? Mr. Webster? Aye. Ms. Ross-Lehtinen? Aye. Ms. Ross-Lehtinen? Aye. Mr. Burgess? Mr. Burgess? Aye. Ms. Slaughter?
No.
Ms. Slaughter? No. Mr. McGovern? Mr. Hastings? Mr. Hastings? No. Mr. Polis? Mr. Chairman? Mr. Chairman?
I am an aye.
Mr. Chairman? Aye.
Clerk will report.
9 yeas, 2 nays.
The motion is agreed to. The gentleman from Florida, Mr. Webster, will be managing this for the Republicans.
Mr. Hastings from Florida.
Mr. Hastings for the Democrats. I want to thank Nancy and Dr. Joe Bryan for being with us this evening. This committee is not expecting to do any other work during the week. I want to thank all the members who have been here for their time, and we've now completed our work for the evening.